name is Scott Henderson. Our topic is the Apollo missions and did we go to the moon? The men chosen for the Apollo astronauts were given extensive training through a variety of locations throughout the United States, including Hawaii, California, Texas, Florida, the Antarctic, Arizona being the most viable for its cooler climate and its large spans at Cinder Lake. And in Cinder Lake, they prepared the most extensive and comprehensive moonscape. They even blasted craters to match the lunar surface so they could perform complete and full simulations when they were practicing. All of the equipment they were using during these simulations were simply mock-ups. The LEM, the experimental equipment, and of course the suits they were wearing, given that they're 180 pounds, would have to be modified down to practice on Earth. The PLSs were simply mock-ups. They did not need any of the equipment inside, and to lighten the weight, they would need nothing more than the communication and a small battery to power it. The suits themselves would have to be lightened up. They would not need to be sealed, and because they were using them over and over again in practice, they would be made easier to put on and off, and they would not need all of the extra equipment and cooling packs and everything else inside. Perhaps just a fan inside the PLS to blow in to cool them down. They would not need to actually lock the gloves on or the helmet securely when they were in practice. They were simply getting used to the bulk of the equipment while they were unpacking, setting up and loading the experimental equipment, and doing the other geological surveys that they were performing, and preparing themselves to use the cameras, because it'd be a lot more difficult to use without having a viewfinder, and the settings would have to be learned because they wouldn't be able to see those either when they're mounted on their chest. Cue cards were made and worn on their wrists so that each of the performed tasks that they were doing, they had a reference to see what kind of rocks that they were looking at the different stations that were set up for them. They had a timeline on which they had to do it, because if you were on the moon, you'd have a limited amount of air supply and you had to perform these tasks within a certain time frame. So they practiced this over and over again on the site, and Farouk Al-Bez was their time management specialist to help them along the way. He also was knowledgeable in geology and the rock formations that they would encounter, and those stations were set up by him, and timing was performed on how long it would take to travel between each station, the amount of film that they'd be using, the amount of pictures they'd be taking, and the camera settings were on the cue cards for them so that they could take a fairly good picture. In the following photographs, we're going to be looking at images that were claimed to be taken on the moon. I believe these were taken during their practice sessions at Cinder Lake. The two locations that were marked out for the practice sessions are directly adjacent to a landfill site, which is not a garbage site for household garbage, but actually a metal scrapyard that was used by both the military and NASA and the Air Force. This site is still in use today and can be seen by any aerial photographs or on Google if you wish to look it up. The first image you're looking at here is Apollo 11 and Buzz Aldrin in the door of the mock-up LEM. You might recall that as he was exiting, he commented on the fact that the door did not have a handle to get back in. If you note the position he's sitting in, and you can see where the PLS is going straight up inside the model, there is apparently a control panel in there for them to land, and if it was actually inside there, if that panel was actually there, he would not be able to sit in that particular position. He would have to be leaning much farther forward. This next image is of the inside of a LEM, showing the control panels and the joystick controls, and the door is directly underneath there. There's absolutely no way he could be in that position if that equipment was in place. The experimental equipment was exactly the same, just mock-ups. As you can see in this image, it has been well used in multiple practice sessions and simply left outside where it has gotten rained on, has mold and dirt, and eventually over time, with use for several years, it becomes sun-bleached, cracked, and curled. As I said, all of the equipment were simply mock-ups. There's absolutely nothing inside the central processing station, and if you take a closer look, it has been very well used. It's been laying on the ground. The upper frame rails are covered in mud and rusted. The mock-ups for the experimental equipment were very quickly thrown together with whatever parts or pieces they had lying around. For example, the ribbon cable spool that you see here is nothing more than a car oil filter, and it also has a little bit of rust on it as well. Here's another example of the same thing being done. Anything they had on hand, quickly thrown together to make the appearance of part of the experimental equipment. This is simply a bilge pump from a boat, and you can see this is a slightly newer model in this next image. However, it's made by the same company. The training programs, of course, that were involved there used large gantry cranes, 300 by 600 feet long by 200 feet high, so that they could practice in simulation the landing of the LEM itself. It was also filmed so that the film could be used in indoor simulations and projected to the astronauts as they were using the simulation and landing. The large plaster molds of the moon itself were also used to create the maps that were used on the rover that were available to them so that they could navigate around with. All of these things were done at Cinder Lake. The astronauts themselves, when they were practicing, were using mock-up equipment out on the set. In a full simulation, they needed to be in a suit because they needed the encumbrance of the suit to keep that timeline in to see how long it would take them when they were fully dressed. An Apollo spacesuit weighs 180 pounds. It would not be suitable for them to practice in and to do the simulations. A suit would have to be designed much, much lighter for them to work in. So in the following photographs, you're going to see what the actual suit looks like. It is much lighter. It does not have to seal. You can see in the photographs that the zippers don't do all the way up. The boots are just zippered in because the ring collar would be absolutely impossible to put your foot through and do that daily and work in it for hours. In the following photographs, you're going to see a number of cars from Apollo 12. They didn't hide them much. There's quite a few there to be found. And of course, here are a few shots of the original photographs of the vehicles that are posted on the ALICE site from David Percy and Mary Bennett, and as well as are in the videos from Apollo Detectives. And in these photographs, you'll see that these cars have been simply placed there as simply a junkyard. The cars are easy to see, very apparent, and if there was perhaps just one, that would be fine, but they're everywhere. Apollo 12 is just laden with automotive parts, machine parts, and metal parts sticking up out of the ground everywhere. And there are photographs of the astronauts digging them out of the ground, picking them up and showing them to you. And as you can see, these are not rocks. These are not natural formations. And it's not just that there's one or two. They are everywhere. Even the rocks that are molded over have machine quality lines in them. Perfect domes, perfect round circles. They shine and reflect back brighter than any other part of the surface. These are man-made parts, unmistakable. Anyone can see them, and they're everywhere. Almost every piece on the ground that you're looking at in the simulations have been shotcreted over to create a lunar surface. These anomalies are in every mission, and they're everywhere. There are no random photographs. I believe that the astronauts themselves were intentionally showing you these items on the ground. The fact that they pick them up and photograph them in particular, the fact that they pull them over, the fact that they can kick open a rock with their boot and show you spark plugs that are inside. It's just amazing. I'm absolutely shocked that these images could get by anyone from NASA, but they did, because they weren't given back to NASA until the 30th anniversary. This is how they got there. They were not ever intended to be shown to the media or to the public at any given time. Only the 3 or 4 dozen professionally done media shots were created for that. Beautifully colored, centered, image quality photographs. Some of those have been airbrushed over to keep them at the highest quality level, but these other shots that the astronauts were using were simply when they were out practicing. They had cameras that worked, so they were taking the pictures. They were exposing these items, and I believe that they wanted to honor their 3 fallen comrades that died. Out of the 60 astronauts, 3 of them died in the fire from Apollo 1. And I believe even if it was only rumored that they were actually killed, that it was not an accident, these astronauts would have been very disgruntled employees. And if they wanted to get back at you, they did a very good job. They exposed this for those astronauts to show how fake it was. In this image, what you're looking at are the right rear frame rail of the rover from 3 different shots. As you can see, they're completely different in design and actual equipment that was being used. On the lower part of this image are 3 different sets of rover tracks made by 3 separate rovers. Here's another look at an Apollo 17 photo. Look at these moon rocks. Just have a quick look around. Just follow my mouse and I'll let you decide. Just typical rocks you'll find on the lunar surface of the Apollo missions. Here again is another Apollo 17 photograph, just a nice panoramic view. Let's go in and have a little closer look and see what's out there. It's always a golf ball, or maybe more than one. This photograph is from magazine 40, Apollo 11. Let's have a look in this crater. Perfectly machined casing with parts inside. You can see them quite clearly. Another piece here. Come up here, you actually have a chain drive right here. 2 perfectly round holes. Another piece of equipment here. And it just goes on. Big tube here. Everything in these photographs have been shot in a junkyard. This is Apollo 16, magazine 115. We certainly are in a scrapyard, that's for sure. This truly is a junkyard. Let's go in and have a little look. These are big pieces of equipment. Okay, now let's have a look at a typical Apollo 16 panoramic view. Nothing really to see here. Looks like a lovely moonscape to anyone who's just looking at this photograph. But if you come in a little closer, and a little closer, you're going to start to see things that should not be in this photograph. So here we go. We're going to zoom in a little closer. The shadows, of course, are trying to block most of the things that are in this photograph, and we're going to come in a little closer. And you can see This mechanical piece here, geared, and as I zoom back out a little bit, it'll get a little clearer for you. You can see a mechanical piece sitting here, and when you come over here a little bit, there's a bunch of pipes sticking out. This looks like it's got a cap end on it, a chrome cap end. Looks down. And some people will say, oh, those are just rocks. That's just the shadow. That's just whatever. Take a look back here again as I zoom out, and you'll see the unusual pieces over here laying in the crater. And if that isn't enough, let's just slide over to this piece of equipment right here. Isn't that beautiful? Highly machined gear here with a bolt running straight on through there. Entire case here. All the parts on the side here. It almost looks like some kind of a big pump motor on it with a shaft running straight out of there. Nothing unusual in the photograph, eh? Just a nice virtual scene for everybody to look at. And there it is right there. All of these other little pieces here, of course, have been shotcreted over. They're harder to see, but they're everywhere. Pieces of equipment like this, when you come in, you can see the machine molded cases or parts that are in this thing sticking out that were not completely covered over when they were grooming the surface. Perfectly round objects like this are available as well. Just a typical moonscape that you'll find in almost every photograph of the Apollo record. This is another Apollo 16 photograph. Typical crater, nothing really to see here, just a lovely moonscape and a very black sky. And as you come down a little bit and look, nothing really unusual to see. So let's just zoom in a little bit. Nothing really standing out. Let's zoom in a little farther. Looks like there's some writing on this. Right here. Very unusual rock. Let's move over to here. Look at this piece of metal. Twisted. Sitting out. Jumping right out from under the thing. I failed to shotcrete it in. All of these pieces here. These are metal objects. You can see the perfect curves on them. You can see how they move around, the big bolts sticking out of them. It's all through here. The longer you look, the more you're going to see. And as you come down through, across, here's a beautiful piece of equipment just sitting there. Zoom out a little bit just to make it a bit clearer, and you can see that it's just sitting perfectly in there. Thrown in there, just on the ground as you zoom through, and you're looking at all these pieces, and the longer you look, the more you're going to see. This is Apollo 17. Beautiful scene. Nice, very smooth mountains of the moon molded in there nicely, and this lovely crater that we're going to have a look at. Of course, Mr. Fetzer will be amused to see that there's a Corvette sitting on the side of this hill here. So let's go in and have a look at it. This is what you see. Beautiful round, beautiful fender at the back. The tow bars here, the front of this car has been completely smashed off. The window is sitting right here. Down it's obviously a convertible. The two seat pockets are right there. Right, the frame rail down. It's all sitting there in place. And that's not the only thing that's in this crater. If you look down, most unusual piece of equipment. Look at this piece of curved steel sitting right in here. It's all rippled effect right here from just pieces of steel. That's what you're looking at. Just a junkyard. And down here, these are shotcreted over pieces of metal, but you can see the bars, the rods sitting here, down through here, and I just follow my mouse around these different things. Big piece of equipment just thrown away. This entire pile here, if you look at this, it's just a wrinkled piece of metal covered over. There's holes in the end of it here, but it's just folded over. Rocks don't do that. Natural formations don't do that. This curvature here around, big casing from some kind of a machine. This looks like a big axle hub or a brake bearing wheel. Back in through here over, pieces that curve around. Perfect 90-degree angles. It's just one big junk pile. You come into here, look at this piece. Completely uncovered. This piece here, follow it around. Just a folded up piece of steel. And here's something that's really amazing. Perfectly curved shadow, and it's actually a chair. There's the shadow of the chair laying on the ground with the perfect ribs in it. We'll pull that back a bit so you can see it. Perhaps if you're a little in shock, you might want to sit down on it. And it doesn't matter where you go in this crater, it just doesn't stop. Look at that. Tool belt, just laying there. There's the leather strap holes to put your tools in. Just discarded, thrown away, laying on the ground. Oh look, I have no idea what it is. Maybe one of the tools that were in the thing. And as you come up through, very unusual pieces of equipment just laying here. It's all over the place. This is the left side of the same crater, and we'll have a closer look at it as well. Initially, it just appears like a scene on the moon, but if you zoom in and look, and zoom up, and there's that tool belt to give you a reference of where we are on this crater. And as you look through and you see these unusual pieces here sticking up and over here, and you see these pieces of steel, the bolt holes in them, highly machined cases, perfectly round holes. This particular piece here is what they used in Ancient Aliens, claiming it was a robot head from an alien source. Absolutely no way that these are natural rocks created from a meteor impact. And as you look through and see the molded pieces of steel and the bands around here, nobody can say that you're in anything other than a junkyard. This is a landfill site, a scrap metal site. And as you scroll up the hillside, you'll see even more things. Thrown away skids or pallets just laying on the ground. You can see the wooden slats coming through here. This is a Mercury outboard motor just laying here on the ground, thrown away. Early 1960s. Let's have a closer look at this particular piece here. Look at this perfectly folded around piece of steel. Pieces of steel here. Pieces of steel here with parts sticking out. Unbelievable. But this is what's in the photographs. This image is from Apollo 17. Just another boring photograph of the many thousands of photographs. So let's just have a little closer look, shall we? Look at all of this just sitting here. Some kind of a tank with a strap and wheels on it. And this piece right here. Just another photograph. If you really are interested in going to the moon, don't forget to bring your golf clubs. You'll need to rent a rover, but as you can see in these photographs here, they weren't just out on any mission at all. They were playing a round of golf. Every shot you see with them at the rover or near the rover, there's a golf ball. And this is in pretty much all of the missions. You will find these golf balls, and that's from Apollo 11 on. Let's have a closer look at this photograph. There's a ball sitting right in there, but that looks like a baseball. They might have been driving a few. I know in Apollo 12 they were playing baseball when they were taking a break between shooting these. And we're going to zoom in a little bit and then start to count the balls. They're all over this set. And here you see them up over here. 1, 2, 3. Sitting up there. There's a ball sitting there. So folks, if you really are interested in the moon, be active in sports. And thank you very much for allowing me to do this presentation.
Ancient Army, that's it. I'm going to get the pro. 99, proceeded. 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Right away, Houston.